And Sami, it's always a huge pleasure to have you on. I'd like you just to, first of all, give us an analysis of any justification that Kais Saied may have had for his original actions on July the 25th. Then we'll come on to what's happening now.
Protested for employment opportunities, for healthcare, for a better way of life, for prosperity. 10 years on from the Arab Spring, this hasn't been achieved. Tunisians are very tired with regards to the current political system. They blame the political parties for the continued embroiling of Tunisia in this economic crisis, in this increased poverty, in this increased lack of unemployment opportunities, while they see members of the political parties, of the ruling political parties, become richer, taking pictures in nice palaces, living a much better standard of life than the rest of Tunisians. And it's in the face of this public anger in that the Tunisian electorate, which voted another 2011, then voted for Nida 2014 on the other side of the spectrum, then voted for an outsider in 2019, 3 different choices, and nothing seems to be improving. And it's in this context or in this environment that Kais Saied was able to essentially move against a very unpopular parliament that needs to be said, a very unpopular parliament. He decided to suspend it. And the reality is that while Tunisians, some of them may not be entirely on board with Kais Saied's coup, that does not necessarily mean that they are with the return of the current parliament. So it's sort of this complex dynamics. But the direct answer to your question is, we got here as a result of the failure of the political system to deliver on the aspirations of the Arab Spring. And now we see a sense of despair in Tunisia that has facilitated Kais Saied's coup.
Yeah, but part of what you said is exactly the point that I was thinking you were going to address. The fact that Saied, almost as an outsider, seems to be on the side of those original protesters, saying, I hear you and I'm going to do something, because we know that for decades there have been vested interests and there have been politicians and there have been elites who have been controlling the country for their own benefit. Why don't the people on the streets today give Kais Saied more time?
I think the reason being is that Kais Saied has had 40, 50 days to show what exactly he intends, and he hasn't arrested any of the businessmen who have been accused of corruption. He hasn't moved against any of their vested interests. And the reality is he's actually gone after MPs who have opposed his coup or opposed him personally. He went after the anti-corruption MP, Yassine Al-Ayari. He went after the Karama Alliance, which most certainly is not known for corruption, even if they're known perhaps for a very bombastic approach to politics. And it's also this idea that there is a complex political dynamic to it, which is that those who supported Kais Saied's coup amongst the political parties did not support the Saied's coup in the favor of the people, but rather to get rid of another which has incessantly come first place in the elections. The idea was Saied would do this coup, get rid of another, and hand parliament back to these powers that are unable to convince the electorate to give them their votes. Moreover, and a very important dynamic is, whereas the people are united in resentment towards the political establishment and the political system, they are not united in how to go forward. They're not united in that Kais Saied is the man to lead the process forward. They're not united in that suspending the constitution is the way forward. They're not united in that changing the system to a presidential system that Kais Saied wants is the way forward. And that's why in recent times, we've seen the trade unions which supported the coup coming out and criticizing Saied and saying, no, we don't want suspension of the constitution, we want early elections. We saw Tayar al-Demokrati, one of the loudest advocates of the coup, and very much anti-Ennahda, coming out on Jawhara FM, one of the most popular local radios, and saying we don't support Kais Saied in the suspension of the constitution, and the problem is a lack of respect for law, and we call on Kais Saied to engage in a dialogue. In other words, it's symptomatic of Tunisia in that everybody is unified in hatred, but not unified in hope. They're unified in resentment towards the political establishment, but not unified in how to go forward. And that's the answer to your question on why people don't want to give Saied this time, in that Saied has got rid of parliament, but now everybody's coming out with a suggestion of how to go forward. But the mess that Saied has created is that where elections were the arbiter to decide how to move forward, Kais Saied has done away with that with his coup. And now we have this sort of legal limbo in that nobody knows how we should proceed. Should we go to a national dialogue? Should we change the system unilaterally via referendum? Should Kais Saied restore parliament? Should parliament not be restored? That's the crisis that Kais Saied has created. And that's why now we're in this stumbling block. And that's also why we're hearing increased opposition to Kais Saied Last week, we had the G7 statement saying we urge a return to a constitutional order, implying they reject Said's statement that he's operating within the constitution. We saw the Congress delegation from the US come and express bewilderment at Kais Saied's conduct. We saw Joseph Borrell express his apprehension over what is taking place in Tunisia. And we're seeing the statements now from Kais Saied supporters that has led Kais Saied to say, I am being stabbed in the back by those who I trusted. And now we're seeing with these protests that are taking place today, the fear factor that was there when Kais Saied originally announced his coup, this impending doom that made another cower and say to Saied, please don't put us in the prisons. We'll give you what you want. We'll engage with you. We'll go early elections. We'll do national dialogue. Just don't come after us. We're seeing that fear being lifted as Saied is stumbling amidst this international pressure, amidst the domestic pressure, even from those who initially supported his coup. And I think the disaster or the mistake Kais Saied made was that he interpreted the landslide victory he won in the election as a support for him personally, as opposed to a rebuke to the political system. He failed to filter between voters like me who voted for Kais Saied because I didn't want Nabil al-Qaroui to become president. He was unable to filter between voters like me and voters who support him specifically. And now he's in a very difficult position in which it's becoming increasingly apparent that people supported getting rid of another, but they don't support Kais Saied leading the next stage.
Sami, as I said before we started the interview, always a pleasure. Thank you so much indeed. Sami Hamdi, Editor-in-Chief of the International Interest.